This week's guest podcast is the Hope Over Fear online debate between Peter A. Bell and Dave Thompson, and it's around the question of list parties. We're going to be broadcasting this in two parts. This week we're covering the opening speeches and questions between the two panellists. Next week we'll cover the Q&A from audience questions.
Good evening, Fescar Ma to everybody, and welcome to the Hope Over Fear online debate, coming to you live from various corners of Scotland tonight. My name's Gwen Sinclair. I'm an activist, an independence activist. I'm also a member of the CND, and I'm chair of Ayrshire CND, and a member of the SNP as well. And tonight I'm going to host an event which I think and hope that you'll find really interesting, and not only that, I do think it's a very important subject, and I think that there's been much debate about it. And tonight we're actually going to try and find a point of view from two different points of view tonight on whether we should use our two votes in the Scottish Parliament elections, which are coming up in May. 2 votes, 1 and 2 for SNP, or whether we should use our first vote for SNP and our second vote for an independence party. Now, obviously, we wanted to max out the amount of people who are representing us in the Scottish Parliament who support independence. And there's never been a more important time, perhaps the most important election that we could, we can think of just now is the Scottish Parliament elections, to show that we are very, very politically engaged in Scotland, and that people in Scotland are very much wanting independence. And we want those who represent us to actually, we support independence. So tonight we've got 2 guests who have come along to debate that with us. The first one I'll introduce you to is Peter Bell. Now, Peter's a blogger, and many of you will remember him from speaking at a lot of the Yes groups back in the last few years. He travelled throughout Scotland and spoke to, including Ayrshire, where I come from. And he also writes a blog, and he also is done a lot of speaking at rallies. So hi, Peter.
Good evening.
Hi. And our other guest tonight is Dave Thompson. Dave was an MSP. He was an MSP for SNP with the Highlands and Islands for a number of years, and then he became the MSP for Skye, Lochaber and Badenoch. And he's now representing the Alliance for the Independence Party tonight. So he's going to be discussing his opinion on that. But basically tonight, our hope is that we will answer your questions. Now, we're going to hear from our 2 speakers, and thanks very much to both of them for coming along. And we're also going to be getting questions coming in from you who are watching at home. So obviously, if you've got any questions about it, please do get them sent in, and I will do my best to ask as many as possible. And so we're hoping that it'll be a really good night, and there'll be lots of information comes out of it. As I said, it's such an important election, and it's important that we know what our options are basically as independent supporters for that election. So I'm just going to start off then tonight with going through how it's going to work. Peter's going to speak for a few minutes on his opinion on it, and Dave will ask him some questions, and then that'll swap over. And we're going to be putting the questions out, bringing questions to them from you at home so that we're watching. And then at the end, there'll be a summing up from both of our members here in the panel. So let's start off with you, Peter. Would you like to start a little discussion about why you think we should vote SNP 1 and 2?
Right, okay, let's start with a correction. When the online poster was first put up for this event, I got a wee bit annoyed, and not because they'd used an old photograph of me from back in the days when I was a fat so and so. Although that was bad enough, I put in the effort. I want to show off this new bod as much as possible. But what actually annoyed me was just precisely what Gwen said there. I'm not in the business of telling anybody how to vote. I have never said to anybody that they should vote SNP 1 and 2. I don't tell people how to vote. I ask questions, and I encourage others to ask questions. That's all. I think when somebody's asking you for your vote, you are entitled to ask questions of them. You have a duty to ask questions of them. And I just point out certain things, and this is perhaps where people have picked up the wrong end of the stick. I point out, for instance, that SNP 1 and 2 has served to keep the British parties in opposition for the past 14 years. That has to be something. It's not nothing. It's actually quite important keeping them in opposition. I'm not asking for anybody's vote. I'm just asking that people really think about how they use their vote. I'm not looking to get a seat in Parliament. I'm not asking how we get rid of unionists from the Parliament. They're entitled to be there. They're there because people vote for them, and we have a proportional system. And I quite like having a proportional system. It's not the electoral system that's the problem, it's the parties. It's the fact that they're British parties. The electoral system is fine. It actually works out quite well for us. So I'm not looking to get rid of unionists. So long as they're in opposition, they're not a problem to me. And I'm not asking how to get a pro-independence super majority. Because having thought about the matter and having asked the pertinent questions, I realise that a super majority is of absolutely no use to anybody. It's not a super majority that we need, it's a super mandate. There's nothing that you can do with a super majority that you can't do with a simple majority. But there's a lot of things that you can do with a super mandate that you can't do if you have no mandate at all or only a weak mandate. So I always ask, the only question that's important to me is what is best for Scotland's cause? When I'm looking at the election next year, I'm asking, what is the outcome that best serves Scotland's cause? And I've come to my conclusions on that, and my conclusions don't involve any of these list parties. I don't know what we're supposed to call them, but my conclusions don't involve any of them.
Okay, thank you. So, Dave, would you like to come in? You're allowed to ask 3 questions here, or less. You don't have to ask 3 if you don't want to. But so, would you like to ask Peter some questions?
Yeah. Thanks very much, Gwen and Peter. Thanks for expounding your position there. That's very, very helpful. I follow lots of your other stuff as I do follow other bloggers too. I just wonder, Peter, when you say that you like the current system, that's fine. It's a proper legal system, just like the Westminster system is, where Boris Johnson and his pals get an 80-seat majority on 42% of the vote. Why is it, do you think, that you'd prefer to have maybe 60-odd unionists in the Scottish Parliament talking down the SNP government, scheming and plotting all the time to undermine independence, rather than knock them down to, say, 35, with 25 independents supporting MSPs from AFI to assist the Scottish government in promoting independence?
First point, the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish electoral system, Scottish voting system, isn't anything like the Westminster system. I said I quite like it because it's proportional. The Westminster system isn't proportional at all. So let's clear that one up right away. Neither did I say, we've got the misrepresentation coming in early, neither did I say that I prefer having unionists in Parliament. It's not a matter of my preference, it's the preference of the people who vote for the unionist parties. And as far as I'm concerned, so long as they have a vote in Scotland, they're entitled to vote for whoever they like. And if that means that they're voting for unionists, then I've just got to suck it up. My preference doesn't come into it. And I actually don't care if they're unionists in the Scottish Parliament. I'm not fussed about that. So long as they're in opposition, they can't do anything to stop our independence. So long as they're in opposition, I don't care. What I object to is not the fact that they're unionists, but the fact that they're British parties and not Scottish parties. I hear you, Dave, saying that you want to get the unionists out of the Scottish Parliament. Well, I set my sights a wee bit higher than that. I want to get the British parties out of Scotland.
Well, thanks very much, Peter. So do I. I've spent 55 years since I was 16-year-old arguing that very point, and we're getting very close to it now. When Ruth Davidson took over the Tories and between 2011 and 2016, her whole mantra was vote Tory and stop the SNP and stop another referendum and stop independence and all the rest of it. And she succeeded. She doubled the Tory regional list vote and she doubled their number of seats from 12 to 24. That was tactical voting. That was strategic voting by unionists. A lot of Labour people voted Tory to stop Scottish independence. In Highland, the Tories got more votes in the regional list than they did in the constituencies. And that's because a lot of Labour and Liberal people voted for them tactically, used the system to max the unionist vote. They're going to do that even more in next year's election. So what would happen if the unionists, as they do in most elections, advise tactical voting to their supporters to go to the party that's most likely to keep Scottish independence off the agenda, which is what they're going to do. And let's say by doing that, they max the unionist vote on the regional lists and keep the SNP from having a majority at all. That's not going to get you independence, is it?
So you're acknowledging that the SNP need list seats, the list seats that you're going to compete with them for?
No, that's not what I said. The SNP will probably get a majority in the constituencies, but if the unionists...
Then why should I care? Then why should I care? Why should I care what the unionists do with the list seats? If they're going to be in the minority, they don't matter. They're not going to be able to do anything. It's the Scottish government that can act.
But they can actually vote tactically in constituencies as well, which could be a problem for the SNP. Our proposals are that we encourage all yes voters, including Labour yes voters, to vote SNP to make sure the SNP get their majority.
Yeah, well, we've already been doing that in past elections. Voting everybody who's an independent supporter, no matter what party is their preference, we're encouraging them to vote SNP. And as I say, it's worked out reasonably well. You yourself referred to the way the polls are now. That's all we have to go by. So we have to just keep saying as things stand. So as things stand, as you say, SNP stand to get a majority on the constituency vote alone. The list would be a wee bit of a safeguard for them, maybe. I don't see why other pro-independence parties should be competing with them on that list. And I don't care what happens to the unionists. I'll say it again. So long as they're in the minority, they don't trouble me in the slightest.
Well, if they tactically vote in the Highlands, they'll knock out the SNP list seat, one of the 4 that the SNP got.
Yeah, but you just said...
Let me finish. That will damage the SNP. However, we've got an answer. We've got an answer for that, and that is to unite all the small parties and get people to vote for AFI and the small parties, and we will actually gain list seats in the Highlands and knock out unionists and make sure that there is an independence majority in the Scottish Parliament, because it's not an SNP majority we need, although I think they'll probably get it in the constituencies. It's an independence majority, and that's the difference.
I'm not sure there was a question in there at all, but I have to tell you that there's a couple of points that I picked up on right away. You talk about uniting. Well, so do all the other ones that are not uniting with you. The whole unite thing just is totally meaningless when it's coming from you guys. It just doesn't mean a thing. And this idea that it's not an SNP majority that we need, it absolutely is, because it's the Scottish government that matters in this situation, the government with a mandate. It's not any of the other parties. It's certainly not the opposition parties. It is all about the SNP this time, because it's all about the Scottish government, and there's only the SNP that's in a position to form a government. That is just pragmatic politics.
Okay, thanks for answering my questions. I'll maybe now do my 5 minutes or so, if that's okay, Gwen. Just to explain fully what Action for Independence, and we've had to change our name to Action because the Electoral Commission didn't like Alliance, to explain what we're all about. And it's to do with the SNP+list seats. We firmly believe that with the whole Yes movement behind the SNP and the constituencies, the SNP will probably win around 69, 70 constituencies, and the latest polls are certainly showing that. Although we can never take these things for granted. And that's great, there's a majority there. But the SNP people who vote SNP with their regional list vote, the second vote, in 6 of the regions in Scotland, out with the Highlands and Islands and south of Scotland, totally wasted their vote. They elected no regional list MSPs for the SNP. But Tories and Labour and Liberals got in their place. What we want to do is make sure that independence supporting MSPs are elected in these regions to replace unionists, to give us that supermajority that Peter says he doesn't need. You know, I was in a minority government between 2007 and 2011, and it was tough, hard work. Bruce Crawford, our business manager, did an amazing job. We actually won about 2/3 of the votes of the motions that we put forward in the Parliament, but we lost 1/3 of them as well because we couldn't get the many coalitions that we needed in the Parliament at that time. I would hate to be in a position where you've got a majority of one in the Parliament. What happens if somebody's sick or if someone dies or whatever? You've then lost your majority. If we want to win independence and win the vote convincingly, we've not only got to get a majority of MSPs, we've got to get that supermajority. 70 SNP and 24 from Action for Independence would give you 94. Plus, we should be looking to get a majority of the vote over and above that. The SNP, for 953,000 votes in the 2016 election, got 4 seats. The Tories and Labour between them got 960,000 votes and got 45 seats. Now, I accept what Peter's saying about this PR so-called system, and it is sort of PR, but it's not properly PR. The unionists have been using that system for decades, and Ruth Davidson used it very, very successfully. All we're doing is saying we want to do that. Now, we've already got one of the smaller parties joining us. We are still speaking to the others, and I think once they start looking at the facts, once they start working through the statistics, they'll realise that the best way for them and for us and for Scotland, which is much more important than any party, is to unite and pull that vote together. All that we actually need is to get one person in 8, right? One person in 8 who voted SNP in the regional lists in 2016 to vote AFI, and we get 8 list MSPs across Scotland. One person in 8 to switch from the SNP and the regional list vote to AFI, and we've got 8 MSPs in Holyrood. That's all we need. 1 in 4, and we get 16. Now, that's a huge bonus for Scotland. It means you've got people in that parliament that are actually positive about Scotland, that will not be trying to undermine the SNP government. Bear in mind that Westminster is already laying its plans to destroy our movement and stop independence. Now, surely it must be a good thing if we are going to maximise the number of pro-Indy MSPs in the Scottish Parliament for the pure purpose of delivering Scottish independence.
Mm. No,
Dave, thank you very much. So, Peter, would you like to ask Dave some questions on that?
Just keeping on saying things doesn't make them true. Given that at the moment we're urgently trying to get people to register to vote and desperately trying to get people to engage with and participate in the democratic process, do you really think it's a good idea to be telling them they're wasting their votes?
Well, I think, Peter, that the facts speak for themselves. If you are in any one of the 6 regions in Scotland where the SNP got no MSPs, and you're an SNP voter and you vote for them in the constituency, it's obvious that your second vote elected nobody at all. And for the SNP to gain any extra regional list seats in those regions, they would need an extra 35 to 40,000 votes. And these votes would all have to come from unionists. What we're saying is, don't vote for the SNP in the regional lists anywhere in Scotland, but vote for independent supporting parties under the AFI banner. We would just need 7,000 or 8,000 votes to get an MSP in those seats. And this is from people who are already committed to Scottish independence, who vote SNP in the constituency, but wisely use their second vote to vote for independent supporting MSPs who have united under the AFI banner. They would need an extra 35 to 40,000 votes. And these votes would all have to come from unionists. What we're saying is, don't vote for the SNP in the regional lists anywhere for independent supporting parties under the banner.
I'm cynical. The more people tell me how easy and wonderful it's going to be, the more cynical I get. And I didn't find an answer in there to the question. What I actually noticed was something that I've learned to watch out for. When the pop-up party, list party, cunning plan party folk, when they're talking about the regional vote, the list vote, you watch out for the times when they start talking about it as if it was a one-off, self-contained, first-past-the-post election. That's how they get to this thing about wasted votes. If in 1 minute they're treating it as if it's part of the additional member system, the next minute they're treating it as if it's a first-past-the-post election. Watch out for that. My second question. You talk about unity. A couple of weeks ago, I took part in an online event where there was yourself and somebody from one of the others and somebody from the Greens. And you were all talking about unity while you were all squabbling and assuring everybody that you would never cooperate with one another. This whole thing about unity is a myth. It's absolutely essential for you even to succeed in your own terms. And it's a myth. It's just not happening.
Okay. Well, first of all, I wasn't squabbling at that debate. It was the one at Oban, I think, that Keith Brown, the deputy leader of the SNP, appeared in, and Lorna Slater, the co-convener of the Greens, and also Professor John Curtis, who at the end of that debate actually thanked me and said he understood better what we were trying to achieve after having listened to the debate. Now, others may well have said that they wouldn't want to join. I think Lorna said that. And we're not asking the SNP to join AFI. But I wouldn't characterise it as squabbling, as you've put it. Unity is what we are trying to do, and this is unique. I would ask you if you have ever heard in your life before in Scottish politics of a party with a constitution that specifically allows other parties to join it and to have their candidates selected into winnable positions on the regional lists. All of the other smaller parties in Scotland are normal, basic parties with their own policies, and they don't allow other parties to join them. They allow individuals to join them. Our party, and it's only a party because you have to register as a party to be able to stand in the election, ours is an alliance, a true alliance. And you know what? I never said it was going to be easy. It's far from easy. But you know what? I've never given up in my life because something was hard. If I had been like that, then back in 1965, when I was 16 and the SNP were getting 3 or 4% in the polls, I would never have joined them. I would have given up at that time. But I didn't. I persevered through the tough times and through the better times for 55 years. So I'm not a quitter. I'm not someone who balks because something's difficult. I mean, what you're really saying, Peter, is that if something's not easy, if it's
don't tell me what I'm saying.
Don't
tell me what I'm saying. Yeah, I'll speak for myself. Thank you very much. No, I'll quite happily show you the respect of letting you speak for yourself. I'll pick you up on a point there. You're not a party. You keep referring to our party. You're not a party. You've been knocked back by the Electoral Commission once, and you're likely to be knocked back again. Who knows?
No.
You may not be a party. Besides, I still don't have any answer to how you're going to get this unity. You talk about how wonderful it would be, but no explanation as how you're going to achieve it. At the very minimum, I reckon there's going to be 3 or 4 pro-independence parties, all squabbling over the same 3 to maybe 7% of the vote, and I just see that as a distraction. I don't see any point in it at all. So we still don't know how you're going to. We still don't know if you're actually going to be a party, and we can be, I think, pretty sure that you're not going to get the unity that you keep talking about. But that brings me to my main question, the big question. You're now calling yourself, this week, you're calling yourself Action for Independence. What action? What can you actually do? Even supposing you get 2 or 3 of your candidates, I don't know, are they your candidates? I don't know. See, that's another one of the problems here. You talk about it being this new idea. Novelty is not a great thing when you're going into elections. People either aren't interested or they don't understand it. Novelty is not an advantage. But what I'd like to know is specifically, and I'm not talking about sitting on the benches cheering, I say specifically, what action does that word in your title stand for? What action would you take in the Scottish Parliament to bring about the restoration of Scotland's independence?
Well, firstly, our resubmission of our application to the EC went in 2.5 weeks ago, and they say they'll take about 4 weeks probably to come back to us, and we're very confident that they will approve us. at the end of next week. So watch this space and see what happens there. The only argument that people seem to have against us is that they think it'll not work, that we'll only get a few percent, just like all other small parties always have done. We're confident if we can get unity, and that is key. You're absolutely right, Peter. And I think when the ISP, the SSP, and the Greens and so on realise that united we stand, divided we fall, they will think more carefully about coming over. Now, they might not. Maybe we'll fail. Maybe we'll fall flat on our faces, but we don't expect to. We have high hopes that the logic of our argument here will win through. And I have never heard you actually denying that the statistics actually prove that we are right, that 1 million votes for the SNP and the regional lists delivered 4 seats. That's 250,000 per seat, whereas the Unionists, Tory and Labour, another 1 million votes, got 45 seats. You've never denied, to my knowledge, that our maths and our arithmetic is correct in terms of what we can achieve if we get up to the 5% and above, which united, we really do believe that we can. What we'll do once we get elected is we'll support independence. We'll back the SNP government and the Parliament in terms of making sure that it doesn't get voted down in a vote of no confidence, which could happen if there's a tiny majority next year rather than a substantial super majority. And we'll back that government through the negotiations for independence. And we'll put forward as strong a case as we can to make next year the independence election. I would argue we've already had a major effect because there's much more talk now about next year being the independence election. The SNP seem far more positive about pushing independence next year. So I would argue we've already had an impact even before we've managed to get registered with the EC. But we are a political party. We have a constitution. I'm not sure if you've seen our constitution, but it would be useful if you maybe had a look at it and read it and based your opinion on how we're structured, rather than what you think, how we may be structured. So we have ambition for Scotland, and we are doing this as a one-off for next year. I'm not in this for personal gain. I left the Parliament 4 years ago. I could have stayed on. There was nothing stopping me from staying on in Parliament. I'm doing this because I really do believe that it's an idea whose time has come, and I'm doing it for Scotland, for my children and for my grandchildren.
So, is that us finished with the questions for just now then? And are you ready to move? Were you wanting to come back on that, Peter?
I just wanted to make the point that there's Dave speaking for me again, saying that I'd never questioned the statistics or the arithmetic. I've also never said that this whole thing, because basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to organise tactical voting. The reason the unionist parties get away with it is that they don't have to try and organise anything, because what they're trying to do is very simple, very straightforward. And they just need everybody doing exactly the same thing. But I've never disputed that it could work in theory. There's lots of things that work in theory, but they don't work in practice. And I've never disputed the arithmetic, but I'm wits enough to know that politics is a lot more than just arithmetic. I've never disputed the statistics, because it's the conclusions that you draw from the statistics that matter. I mean, it may be right to say the SNP got 900,000 odd votes and you got 4 seats. That may be perfectly true, a perfectly accurate thing to say. But to conclude from that you need a proliferation of list parties is a bit of a nonsense. It's the conclusions that are drawn from these things that are very dubious.
Well, your conclusion...
When people say to me, sorry, David, just excuse me a moment. People say to me, I get this all the time, you can't argue with the numbers. You can't argue with the figures, they say, to which I reply, jeers.
Well, Peter, you finished off there by saying you came to the conclusion that a proliferation
That's not what
of
I
parties...
said.
No, you just did. Proliferation of parties wouldn't work. Well, you see, you've got it wrong again. You're not listening to what I'm saying. We have a constitution which allows the smaller parties to come together under the AFI umbrella. Already Solidarity have come on board. If the SSP and the ISPs and the Greens came on board, you'd have 5 parties standing together. Now, that's not a proliferation of parties. That's a uniting of parties, a reduction in proliferation from 4 or 5 to 1. That is what is behind our whole argument. Concentrate the effort, concentrate the vote, unite the clans, if you like, and beat the unionists. What's not to like?
You say it's your ambition, and you say, if we do this, hang on a minute, have we got to depend on that? I tell you what, here's the thing, I'll ask you a question. If you haven't got the unity that is your ambition by a particular date, let's say 3 months before the election, will you roll up your carpet and go home? Will you just pack it all in, disband the AFI?
You're basically arguing that I should give up now. Well, I've said
no, that's not what I said at all.
Very easily.
That's not what I said at all. That's not what I said. You said that yourself, that the whole thing depends on getting this unity. You said, if we get this unity, you said it's your ambition to get this unity, which implies that you don't yet have it. Well, we all know you don't yet have it. What I'm saying is there a point at which, if you haven't got that unity by that time, you will withdraw? Or are you just going to carry on even without the unity? In which case, why is the unity important in the first place?
We are confident we're going to get the unity.
No.
Now, let me finish. We're confident that the folk who currently vote SNP in the second votes, where their votes in the main are wasted, will see the strength of our arguments. And politics is all about putting your argument forward and convincing the people. We are confident that once we get that message out to the public, that folk will come behind us and they'll say, yeah. Now, if you actually look at what's happened previously, you'll notice that the SNP vote in their lists in 2016 was 2% lower than its constituency vote. But the Green vote was 2% higher than their constituency vote. These were people who voted SNP in the constituency and had already worked out that it was a waste of time voting SNP on the list. So they went to the Greens, and the Greens benefited. And I haven't heard anybody accusing the Greens of gaming the system, which seems to be one of the big problems people have with us. There are many more people out there, when you explain to them exactly what you can do on a very small percentage of the SNP voters coming over, who will see the strength of that argument. And we will be building that argument. And I'm absolutely confident that we'll get enough people. And once you see movement in the polls, then others will all come in behind.
from
I'll
there?
tell you what I think. I think the days are gone when politicians could get away with dodging the question like that and just keep on talking in the hopes that everybody will forget what the question was. I think those days are past. I think people see that sort of thing going on, and I don't think they like it. I don't think they like it. If they want that sort of thing, they can listen to Westminster politicians.
Join us at the same time next week for part 2 of this debate.
Ending Life Talk Radio.